Howdy, I'm cowboy singer Rex Hooper, and one of my favorite Western soundtracks is Louis Bacalov's score for the 1966 cult classic, Django.
Django! Django, have you always been alone? Django! Django, have you never loved?
Louis Bacalov was a Jewish Argentinian who moved to Italy in the 1960s to become a film composer. After Ennio Morricone, the second greatest spaghetti western film composer is Louis Bacalov. After the critical and commercial success of Ennio Morricone's western themes, there were countless imitations. People trying to sound like Morricone. And Bacalov, I would say, achieves the second best. The fact that there were so many imitations, I don't see as a bad thing. All we're left with is a huge wealth of this great music. Turns out the world has the capacity, not just for the best, but for all the rest too. And hey, sometimes an imitation isn't so bad. Sometimes the shadow of a thing can be greater than the thing. Because it is impossible to fully escape the attributes of being yourself, each of these imitations of Morricone's music has their own unique style. Each artist brought their own personal preoccupations to a sound. And I guess that's how any genre forms. Is you have your initial pioneers, and then those that follow in the wake, but it forms its own sound. Each person doing a version of what came before. And I think that the spaghetti western genre is so rich because not only is it made up of all these great artists that put it together, but the musical roads that they draw from. You have classical, you have surf, you have psychedelia, country rock, and even jazz. All brought together in the mix. Louis Bacalov's own personal preoccupations make for a darker sound. Something more brooding, menacing than most of Ennio Morricone's efforts. Less hopeful, less heroic. Something altogether darker. By 1966, the market for Italian westerns had opened up. And plenty of them were made. They were made cheap, they were made fast. That made for varying results of quality. But one of the things that I love about those Italian westerns is that real artists were behind them. They had specific genre conventions to stick to. They needed to have certain elements that would make it a hit, make it a western. But within those parameters, the artists and creatives behind these films could do something subversive with it. The 1966 film Django was directed by Sergio Corbucci, who was a deeply political filmmaker. All of his films, the good ones at least, are about fascism. Django is a lone gunslinger who comes to a town where a clan of fascists have their grip over the people, and it's up to Django to deal out his own brand of justice. Unlike the American Western counterparts, these Italian Western films didn't have so much in the way of dialogue, but it left space for the music, and it's the music that tells the emotional story. It lets us know who these characters are and what's going on. We don't need the dialogue to tell us who Django is. The music tells us who Django is. And it tells us he's a goddamn badass. The Django opening theme swings and swaggers with a bombastic rock and roll energy. That electric guitar, it cuts through like a bowie knife, skin on a pelt. The tambourine crash is like a boot, a spurred boot, walking towards its destiny. And that big heavy piano, the chord ringing out as though the saloon player is stopped and fried at the mysterious stranger that just walked in. Now the director, Sergio Corbucci, he wanted Elvis Presley to sing the opening titles. He wanted to have a rock and roll energy to the whole film. Of course, he already knew the king was going to be out of his price range. So we had to find an Elvis-like singer. and he found one in Rocky Roberts. Roberts does a fantastic job on that track. He gives it a bombastic, machismo energy. It's as much Italian as it is American. One of the ways that the Italians made their films was they didn't record any of the sound on set. Every single sound in the film was done in post, whether that be the sound of the wind, or the cocking of a gun, or gallop of a horse. Every single sound made in those Italian westerns were done in post. They were constructed, and many a movie Philistine, this is a source of great hilarity when the actors' lips don't match the dubbing of the sound. But to me, I think it adds to the film's charm. But also, it's a point of artistic endeavor, that the sound was constructed. It was an art piece, something that people worked on, and it meant for more interesting and creative choices being made in terms of the relationship of the sound to the film. The way that Luis Bacalov scores his films, there's always an interesting relationship between the images on screen and the music itself. They're not always pulling in the same direction. For instance, an exciting action scene could be scored with a menacing slow waltz, or some scenes of brutal, torturous violence might be scored by an upbeat Mexican tango. This same technique of disjointing the images with the sound would be later utilized by spaghetti western and Luis Bacalov enthusiast Quentin Tarantino. One of my favorite examples of Quentin Tarantino doing this is in Kill Bill for Oren Ishii's backstory, where he uses Luis Bacalov's score for The Grand Jewel. Django was banned in the UK all the way up into the 1990s. It was banned because of its violence, but also because of its mean-spirited nihilism. But it gained a huge audience all over the world. And for some reason or another, it seemed to chime a lot with developing countries around the world, possibly because of its anti-imperialist message. Round about the 1970s, when the film was distributed around the world, the characters of Django and Franco Nero, the actor who plays Django in the film, their names are referenced in several ska and reggae songs that came out of Jamaica at the time. Django was a big hit around the world, and often, to try and sell more tickets, the Germans used to put the term Django in the title of all the other spaghetti westerns. Regardless of the official title, they would call it Django Returns or Django vs. Sartana. Had absolutely nothing to do with the original film or the creators behind it, but people loved Django, so they'll probably love this, I guess was what the producers were thinking. In 2012, Quentin Tarantino used the name Django in his own version of a spaghetti western, Django Unchained, and he used that Luis Bacalov opening theme for the original Django in his film, his American version of an Italian western. Part of the attraction of Django for me is that it services my own vanity. As a musician in Scotland in 2022, it shows that sometimes an imitation can be something powerful too. These Italians, they were trying to copy the image of the mythic West as they saw it. And I guess that's what I'm doing too. If you want to hear my attempts, you can check them out on the Spotify, on the Bandcamp, for my record, Frontera USA, very much inspired by Luis Bacalov, Ennio Morricone, and all the other great imitators. If you enjoy Western content, I suggest you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Don't cost you a thing, and it helps me out. Now, maybe my favorite opening title song is Django by Luis Bacalov. Maybe. There's a lot of good options to choose from. But what's your favorite? What is your favorite opening theme song for any Western? Let me know in the comments section below. And I'll see you later on, cowpokes. Later on down the trail.